Welcome to today's deep dive. Today we're using Open Democracy's investigative journalism to kind of explore the world of dark money in British politics.
It's a fascinating area,
Oh,
I
definitely.
think, because it really does get to the heart of how power and influence work in a democracy.
Right. And so what exactly makes these donations dark? Like, why is it so hard to figure out where the money's really coming from?
Well, I think the simple answer is because people hide it.
Right.
Dark money refers to political donations,
Mhm.
where the source of the funds is hidden, making it difficult, if not impossible, to determine who's ultimately behind the money.
Okay. And why is that a problem? Like, if someone wants to donate to a political cause, why shouldn't they be able to do so anonymously?
Well, imagine you're playing a game, but some players are wearing masks, and you can't see their faces. You don't know who they are or what their motivations are.
Right.
It wouldn't really feel like a fair game, would it?
Definitely not that.
That's kind of what's happening with dark money in politics. When we don't know who's funding campaigns and lobbying efforts, it becomes much harder to determine whether politicians are acting in the best interest of the public or if they're being influenced by hidden agendas.
Right, right. It's like having this secret hand pulling the strings from behind the scenes.
Exactly. And that lack of transparency erodes public trust in the entire system. It feeds the perception that politicians are beholden to special interests, not the people they represent.
So, Open Democracy set out to uncover some of these hidden networks. What
Right.
were some of their key findings?
Well, they systematically investigated suspicious donations across the political spectrum. So they didn't focus on any one party. They followed the money wherever it led.
Okay, so let's get into some specifics. Where did they start?
One of their investigations focused on the Democratic Unionist Party, or DUP, a Northern Irish party that was a key supporter of Brexit.
Uh-huh. And this is where we start to see the kind of global reach of this dark money, right?
Absolutely. Open Democracy found that a large donation to the DUP, which ended up supporting the Brexit campaign, was funneled through a secretive group based in Glasgow.
And this is where it takes kind of an interesting turn, right? Tell me about the connections they uncovered.
So Open Democracy dug deep and found links between the chair of this Glasgow group and some intriguing figures, including a former head of Saudi intelligence. They also uncovered a connection to a Danish individual implicated in arms trafficking in India.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's like something out of a spy novel.
It is.
And even though Open Democracy and BBC Northern Ireland, who picked up the story, couldn't definitively trace the original source of the money, their work wasn't wasted, right?
Right, not at all. Their investigation exposed a huge loophole in the system, which led to legal changes that made it much harder for similar shadowy donations to occur in the future. So you see how Open Democracy didn't just expose a single shady donation, but they actually helped change the laws to make it harder for this to happen again.
Oh, that's impressive. It shows how investigative journalism can have a real impact. Now, besides political parties, Open Democracy also looked into individuals, right?
Yes, they did. And one of the most prominent figures they investigated was Aaron Banks, a businessman often referred to as the man who bought Brexit due to his significant financial contributions to the Leave campaign.
Right, right. I remember hearing about him. There were a lot of questions surrounding the source of his wealth, right?
That's right. Open Democracy's investigation revealed inconsistencies in Aaron Banks' financial claims, suggesting the source of his massive Brexit donations may be less legitimate than he portrayed.
So what did they find?
Well, their analysis of Banks' business dealings showed his insurance businesses were struggling financially around the time of the referendum. His diamond mines in Lesotho, which he claims were hugely profitable, also weren't producing as many diamonds as he suggested. Open Democracy even found evidence that Banks had sought fundraising help from Steve Bannon, a controversial figure who was deeply involved in the Trump campaign and Cambridge Analytica.
And to top it off, they discovered he had provided misleading information to Parliament about his dealings. That's a lot of red flags.
It certainly raises questions about the true source of his wealth and the motivations behind his generous donations to the Brexit campaign.
And I understand their investigation into Brexit campaign spending also led them to Cambridge Analytica, that data firm that got into so much trouble.
Yes. Open Democracy uncovered a link between several seemingly independent campaigns, all using the same obscure merchandise provider. This suggested coordination that raised serious questions about potential campaign finance violations. What's particularly concerning is that Open Democracy revealed Cambridge Analytica's roots in the privatization of military propaganda.
Wait, so tactics developed for psychological warfare were potentially used to influence voters in the UK? That's pretty disturbing.
It raises a lot of ethical questions about the methods used to sway public opinion, especially during such a pivotal referendum.
And this wasn't their only discovery related to potential wrongdoing by Brexit campaigners, right? Didn't their work also shed light on the activities of the European Research Group, or ERG?
Yes, Open Democracy did some digging into the ERG, a group of conservative MPs who were strong advocates for a hard Brexit. They uncovered that the ERG's ambition went far beyond just leaving the EU. They were pushing for a radical transformation of the UK into a low-tax haven that would attract businesses and capital by minimizing regulations and taxes.
That sounds appealing on the surface, but what are some potential downsides to that approach? Did Open Democracy uncover any negative consequences?
Well, they found that despite being essentially a lobbying group, the ERG was receiving funding from public sources. They also raised concerns about potential breaches of the ministerial code, as some government ministers were members of the ERG, raising questions about conflicts of interest.
So their investigation into the ERG revealed potential conflicts of interest and misuse of public funds. It seems like they were uncovering a pattern of questionable practices related to Brexit.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that Open Democracy didn't just make accusations. They backed their claims with meticulous research, including collaborations with accountants and on-the-ground reporting in Lesotho, adding significant weight to their findings.
Speaking of uncovering patterns, didn't Open Democracy also investigate the role of dark money in funding think tanks?
They did, and their findings were quite revealing. Think tanks often present themselves as neutral sources of expertise, but Open Democracy's work highlighted how opaque funding can create biases and hidden agendas.
So they weren't always as impartial as they claimed to be.
Their investigations show that funding sources often influence the research and policy recommendations of these think tanks. Open Democracy focused particularly on the Legatum Institute, tracing their funding back to a hedge fund in Dubai and an individual who had profited immensely from the collapse of the Soviet Union.
And I remember reading about a staff member at Legatum who had unusual access to government ministers during the Brexit negotiations, despite the source of his salary being unclear. What happened there?
Open Democracy's reporting led to that individual's resignation from a government advisory role due to concerns about conflicts of interest. It really highlighted the lack of transparency and accountability within these powerful networks.
It's unsettling to think about how much influence these unelected individuals and groups might have on policy decisions.
It is. And that's why Open Democracy's work is so crucial. By shedding light on these hidden networks, they're helping to level the playing field and empower citizens to demand greater transparency and accountability from their elected officials.
Okay, so we've covered political parties, individuals, and think tanks. What other areas did Open Democracy investigate?
They also delved into the world of lobbying, particularly the activities of the European Research Group, or ERG, which we discussed earlier.
Right, that group of conservative MPs who were pushing for a hard Brexit. What did Open Democracy uncover about their lobbying efforts?
Well, their investigation revealed that the ERG was using a combination of dark money and public funds to advance their agenda. They were also found to be receiving donations through the same secretive channel as that DUP donation we discussed earlier, suggesting a coordinated network of influence operating behind the scenes.
So it wasn't just isolated incidents. There seems to be a pattern of deliberate obfuscation and potential manipulation of the system.
Exactly. And this raises some fundamental questions about the integrity of our democratic processes. If powerful groups can operate in the shadows, using undisclosed funds to influence policy decisions, how can we ensure that those decisions truly reflect the will of the people?
Right. That's a really important point. It seems like Open Democracy's work isn't just about exposing specific cases of wrongdoing, but it's about highlighting systemic issues that undermine the very foundations of democracy.
Absolutely. Their investigations force us to confront uncomfortable truths about the ways in which power operates, and they challenge us to demand better from our political systems.
So after uncovering all this, what are some of the key takeaways from Open Democracy's investigations?
I think one of the most important takeaways is that dark money is a pervasive problem that affects democracies around the world. It's not limited to one country or one political party. It's a systemic issue that requires systemic solutions.
Okay. And what might those solutions look like?
Well, a good starting point would be greater transparency in political financing. We need stricter laws that require full disclosure of all political donations regardless of the source.
So no more hiding behind shell companies or anonymous donors.
Exact. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, as they say. When we know who's funding political campaigns and lobbying efforts, it becomes much harder for them to operate in the shadows and exert undue influence.
Makes sense. And besides transparency, are there other steps we can take to address this issue?
Absolutely. We need to empower independent regulatory bodies to effectively enforce campaign finance laws. We also need to strengthen whistleblower protections so that people who come forward with information about wrongdoing can do so without fear of retaliation.
Those are all really important points, but it can feel overwhelming. To think about tackling such a big problem, what can we as individuals do to make a difference?
Well, awareness is the first step. The more people understand the issue of dark money and its impact on our democracies, the more likely we are to see meaningful change.
So talking about it with our friends and family, sharing articles on social media, those sorts of things.
Exactly. We can also support organizations like Open Democracy that are committed to investigative journalism and holding power to account. Their work is crucial for shedding light on these hidden networks and empowering citizens to demand better from their governments.
And of course, we can always vote for candidates who champion transparency and campaign finance reform.
Absolutely. Every election is an opportunity to make our voices heard and demand a more ethical and accountable political system.
Well, this has been an incredibly eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I have a much better understanding of the complexities of dark money and the threat it poses to our democracies.
It's a complex issue, but it's one that we can't afford to ignore. The future of our democracies may depend on our willingness to confront this problem and demand better from our leaders.
So, what are some things you think we should be keeping an eye on in the future?
I think it's important to pay attention to how technology is being used to facilitate dark money transactions. We're seeing a rise in the use of cryptocurrencies and other digital tools to make it even harder to track the flow of money.
So it's like a whole new level of obfuscation.
Exactly. We also need to be aware of how foreign actors might be using dark money to interfere in our elections and political systems.
Yeah, it's something we've seen a lot of in recent years.
Yes, and it's a trend that is likely to continue. The fight against dark money is a global one, and it requires international cooperation to be truly effective.
It's clear that there's a lot of work to be done, but it's encouraging to see organizations like Open Democracy leading the charge and inspiring others to take action.
Their work is a testament to the power of investigative journalism and the importance of a free and independent press and holding power to account.
I think this deep dive has really highlighted the importance of staying informed and engaged in the political process. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of such complex challenges, but knowledge is power, and by understanding the issue of dark money, we can start to demand better from our leaders.
Yeah, that's a great point. And remember, it's not just about individual action. We need to work together collectively to create a more transparent and accountable political system that serves the interests of all citizens, not just a select few.
Well said. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. It's been an incredibly insightful and thought-provoking conversation.
It's been my pleasure. It's always a privilege to discuss these important issues and to hopefully inspire others to join the fight for a more just and equitable world.
Yeah, it really has been fascinating and a little bit scary to see how deep this rabbit hole goes.
It is. It's definitely a reminder that we can't take our democratic institutions for granted. We need to be vigilant and proactive in protecting them from these hidden influences.
Absolutely. Well, before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on one more thing that struck me about Open Democracy's investigations.
What's that?
It's how they managed to uncover so much information that was intentionally hidden. It seems like they were constantly running into roadblocks and facing resistance from those in power.
Yeah, that's a hallmark of good investigative journalism. It's about asking tough questions, digging deep and not taking no for an answer.
Open Democracy clearly wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo and hold those in power accountable.
They were really persistent, weren't they? I mean, they faced legal challenges, personal attacks, even attempts to discredit their work, but they never gave up.
That's what makes their work so inspiring. They're a reminder that even in the face of immense power and secrecy, a small group of dedicated individuals can make a difference.
Absolutely. Their work is a testament to the power of truth and the importance of a free press. They've shown that even the darkest secrets can be brought to light with enough determination and courage. Yeah, and their work has had a real impact. They've exposed wrongdoing, prompted legal changes, and sparked public debate about the influence of dark money in our democracies.
It's incredible to think that a relatively small organization like Open Democracy could have such a profound impact on the political landscape.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in safeguarding our democracies. We can't rely solely on journalists and activists to do the heavy lifting. We all need to be informed, engaged, and willing to speak out against injustice.
So what's the most important thing listeners should take away from this deep dive?
I think the key takeaway is that knowledge is power. The more we understand about how dark money operates, the better equipped we are to challenge it. We need to support organizations like Open Democracy, advocate for greater transparency in political financing, and hold our elected officials accountable.
Well said. Well, it's been a privilege to learn from you today and to gain a deeper understanding of this critical issue.
The pleasure was all mine. It's always inspiring to connect with people who are passionate about making a difference.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of dark money in British politics. It's been a fascinating journey, and we hope it's inspired you to stay curious, stay informed, and keep fighting for a more transparent and accountable world.
Until next time, keep asking those tough questions. And remember that the fight for democracy is an ongoing one that requires our constant vigilance and participation.